Hi, my name's Samuel Duncan, and this is my presentation video blog style for MMCS260 Documentary Media, Forms, Histories and Futures, because I have missed all the presentation weeks through absence, which I apologise for immensely. Authorial intention, or the intent of the author to get a certain point across to the viewer in a sense of the documentary, which is ever present in any film of the genre. A filmmaker, and especially a documentary filmmaker, has a point of view. And whether they are trying to capture the real or bring to the surface the underlying message, the authorial intent is to show that to the audience. The way that they communicate this intent to the audience is manufactured in many ways, through documenting events, responses, and real actions and activities. The audience is shown a point of view into the situation, and from that they can take a stance on it as they choose. Many documentary filmmakers give a biased opinion or take the moral high ground and say that they belong to the cinema verite or cinematic truth. Whereas the subjects become unaware of the camera and therefore act naturally without performance, creating a real circumstance in which the filmmaker can say that they have captured the real. However, the notion of authorial intent throws this concept out the window, and by looking predominantly at Waltz with Bashir, Ari Folman from 2009, and the hybrid documentary theory of filmmaking, I hope to explain the explicit way in which this form acts as an authored work. So, authorship in terms of the documentary has traditionally been problematic, as it suggests and reiterates the fact that the film has predetermined messages to bring across. Stella Brucey states in New Documentaries, a critical introduction, the question of authorship has traditionally proved a thorny problem for the documentary, as the recognised intervention of an auteur disrupts the non-fiction film's supposed allegiance to transparency and truthfulness. So the documentary, whether or not it is authored or performed, has importance through the act of filming. For film subject matter, has integrity and therefore importance in the eyes of the audience. However, the audience does expect a level of truthfulness, and Brucey puts it transparency in the way the film is put together. We as the audience expect to see real performances and narratives from non-actors whom the story has relevance to, juxtaposed with experts or professionals in the field in which the documentary subject matter is concerned. There are many ways that the authors of documentary films achieve this, through interview processes, real-time footage of events, narratives of the persons involved, and dramatized reenactments. But in terms of authorship, we see this more and more now, whereas the director will play a significant role in the process of the film. Through appearing within the film, whether it is Michael Moore himself staging a confrontation with himself and the victims, Agnes Varda playfully filming her hand whilst in a car, also the elements of voiceovers and personal narrative, and an original stylization such as Ari Folman in Waltz with Bashir. All of these elements, along with the notion of authorial documentary making, belong, I believe, to the new way of documentary filmmaking, that of the hybrid documentaries. So Janet Merriweather describes the hybrid documentary as not only authored but also as having diverse directorial methods, which may be considered as director's style and containing a high level of original stylistic approaches to the representation of the subjective voice. She goes on to state that the hybrid questions the existence of objectivity and fixed definitions of history, culture, and identity. Its embrace of pastiche and fantasy differentiate it from the conventional definition of documentary as a conveyor of truth. Therefore, the hybrid documentary challenges the traditional sense of documentary filmmaking in the sense of complete transparency and truthfulness. It opens the genre up to a highly stylized original works of non-fiction, authored filmmaking, which is another characteristic of the hybrid form, that of the author. This new form is generally highly associated with the director. They are informed by the personal experiences of the director and are often autobiographical. Much like Janet Merriweather's film Maverick Mother of 2007, in which Janet uses a sort of film diary to capture her experiences of childbirth through a sperm donor, and then the ramifications of this event on her life and relationships within it. In this autobiographical documentary, she supposes the film as a hybrid form of the filmmaking technique by not only featuring heavily in the film herself, but also by adapting different creative and stylistic modes into the film. Perhaps takes the form a lot further, both stylistic and stylistically and much more innovatively, is Waltz with Bashir, the autobiographical film about one man's post-traumatic stress about a horrific event. So just before I start talking about Waltz with Bashir, I'm just going to show a quick clip of Waltz with Bashir, just to give you a little indication of what I'm going to be talking about.
ככה אני שוכב על סיפון מעולף. ואני חולם על הרגע שבו סוף סוף מגיעה האישה. ולוקחת אותי בפעם הראשונה. וממול אני רואה את החברים שלי, החברים הכי טובים שלי נשרפים ממול העיניים. איפה? שם על האונייה.
Ari Folman, the director, attempts to come to terms with the events of 1982 when he was a young Israeli soldier, and indeed his and Israelis' inevitably foreseeable involvement in the massacres of the Palestinian refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila. The film itself goes from dream sequences to moments of memory and follows interview-style representations of Ari trying to find solace and indeed the truth through friends. It's a film not only about one soldier's contempt and remorse of having been involved in one way or another in the horrific events, but also coming to terms in the way that Israel and the Jewish people have gone from the victims of genocide and obviously through the Holocaust to now the occupier and perpetrators of similar events and atrocities. It's this situation that features so heavily in the film. It has created an Israel that has an unstable sense of identity, both being disassociated and at the same time an invader and an occupier. And it is this that the film's authorship is focused on through the director. But the film itself is much more than a standard documentary. It is indeed a hybrid of the form in the same sense as Janet Merriweather defines by stylistically innovating, is autobiographical, and is based on real events, but also predominantly streams of consciousness of the author. So stylistically, the film is very different and innovative. It is, of course, completely animated, making the dream sequences and moments of changing memory visually spectacular. But also it immediately changes the audience's perception of the film, as we as the audience generally associate the documentary as a representation of the real or reality. It's this contradiction that throws the audience off that allows the film to embrace a much more entertaining and interesting dialogue with its viewers. Stephen Aoun, author of a DVD review of Waltz with Bashir, writes a little bit more aptly than I on the subject. He says that the animated documentary explicitly draws attention to its own artifice and makes little pretense to objectivity in the conventional sense. As an investigation into post-traumatic stress, it presents subjective and fragmented states of consciousness in a bid to become more self-conscious or reflective. Waltz with Bashir's animated sequences create a heightened state of reality as they draw attention to the illusion of life and the unreliability of observation. This disjunct between observers and observed lies at the heart of the film's own investigation, implicating viewers in its screening process. Another way in which Bashir is innovative and a hybrid is in the way that it chooses to not go with historical factual information to ground its statements, but how the author has chosen to give first-person perspectives and indeed streams of consciousness and memory to the audience in order for them to gain the knowledge. The film gives us not a biased but a very much one-sided view of the story and the events, which creates a kind of not only self-reflexive story but a remorseful, non-guilty account of the author's own conscience, which also exemplifies the notion that this particular hybrid documentary is not concerned with complete representation of reality or the real, but in fact just an example of one person's own thought, experience, and perspective. Waltz with Bashir, as well as Janet Merriweather's films, exemplify the ways in which documentary filmmaking has taken innovation, performativity, and stylized techniques and shifted the genre conventions into a new form of hybrid documentary. In all three films, the author's intent is transparent in terms of the way they wish the film to be seen by the audience through the particular director's choice of stylization and film narration techniques. Thank you.